The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
I think sometimes it's the unexpected or the strange things that maybe grab my attention. I feel there's so much around us, that's very wondrous and exciting and all of that, but we're immune to it because we've seen it all. And I think that's what stories do in general. They're highlighting something that is really there, but we don't notice it or pay attention to it, because it's familiar to us.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. When Summer Short was in college, she was a science reporter for her campus newspaper. She wrote about nanotech tweezers, poultry farm pollution, and the nighttime habits of spiders and snakes. That curiosity about the world around her has served her well in her career as a writer of fiction for young readers. Her stories about mutant mushrooms and killer komodos seem fantastical, and they are, but they have their roots in the weird realities of actual science. Summer's new book is The Legend of Greyhollow. Kirkus Reviews called it a delightful, engaging, otherworldly adventure sure to charm. This fun read artfully combines our reality with Greyhollows. Fans of the Lord of the Rings and Portal fantasies will find much to enjoy. I was very happy to get to sit down and talk with Summer Short. Summer Short, I'm so glad to have you on the Habit Podcast today, and I'm excited about your book you've got coming out, The Legend of Greyhollow. Did I pronounce that right? Greyhollow?
Greyhollow.
Greyhollow,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
And I think we'll be releasing this episode right about the time the book releases. So tell me, what's this book about?
So this book is about a girl. Her name is Ainsley, and she's 12. She has a little brother, Tobin. He's 10, and their family has just moved to this small town, Lowry, and it is famously the setting for a blockbuster movie series called The Legend of Greyhollow. And the movies were filmed there years ago. The sets are still in the town. There's a movie festival, and her parents have purchased the home that once belonged to the director of the Greyhollow movies, who mysteriously disappeared about 10 years ago. They want to turn the old house into a movie-themed bed and breakfast. And so the action kind of gets going from there when the kids stumble into the attic and they find all this old movie equipment. They get the movie going, and through a few different steps, they end up going into the world of Greyhollow. And it's a high fantasy movie, so there's gargoyles and wizards and all sorts of dangerous sorts of things. And later on, they do end up unleashing some things into their small town too that they have to deal with. So not only do they go into the world, they also bring that world to their small town.
One of the things that I find really interesting about the way you tell this story is, the way you've described it. It'll be clear to listeners that it's a portal story where people, the kids are going. They have a way of getting into this movie, and so one of the things that's really interesting is they'll go into the movie world and they'll say, okay, well, this is the peasant's feast, and we know that. We know nothing bad happens at the peasant feast, and so they know what to expect, except they're always wrong, right? And so, I'd say they're always wrong. I guess there's certainly some things they're right about, but I think that's such an interesting idea that when you get flung into Narnia, you don't really know what to expect. You have to figure it out, and these kids are flung into Greyhallow, and this is a movie we know very well, and I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but
yeah, so that was kind of fun to play with because I think about like movies that I love, like The Lord of the Rings, or whatever the movie might be, and we do know those movies well. And then if you were there, what would you do? How would you that certain times are safer than others? Yeah. Oh, visit so and so, and that'll be great, and we'll eat the food and all of that. But because of things have changed in this world, and that's some of the puzzle that they have to find out later of why, nothing is as it should be. And so that was kind of fun to play with of, a familiar world. Cause I think a lot of us, imagine what it'd be like to go into these like stories that we love so much, or books or movies or whatever that you love. And then how would that actually be? It can't, now that you've entered it, obviously something's changed, so it can't be on the same trajectory. If you think about like time travel, once somebody has, gone back in time, well, that's going to change the future. It's kind of the same concept of, well, now something has entered this movie, and, does that mean somebody else entered it before, or what does this mean? It's not the same as it originally was.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the idea that we're going to go to the peasant feast, and we've seen these movies. We know the peasants are just cheerful and having a good time, but when they show up, the peasants are like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, the peasants they kind of act like, well, like maybe small town people do act when strangers show up. It's kind of like, what are you doing here, and why are you? What do you want from me, and all that kind of stuff. And
so the things that they expect to have, be really fun and exciting for them end up being a little bit more, keep them on their toes. They have, whatever plans they've made aren't going to be working out quite as they hoped.
Yeah. And one thing I was thinking about as I was reading it is, for one thing, they said, oh, well, we know that this peasant feast lasts for several hours, but obviously in a movie, it doesn't last several hours. It lasts a couple of minutes. And so when you're flung into the movie, suddenly you're also having to live through all the boring stuff. I don't even know where I'm going with this thought, but it was just funny. I mean, think about all the things that never appear in a movie.
Yeah.
People, you don't see people just casually sneezing in a movie, right? I mean,
because they expect to have several hours of thinking that something's, going to not happen for, and then figuring out the movie timeline versus real time for them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess all this touches on an idea that you mentioned to me before that you're interested in. It's just the idea of subcreation. You've got stories within stories within stories in your story, and I'd love to hear you talk about some of those meta narrative-y things that you had to think through.
Yeah, so I had a lot of fun with certain aspects of this story, particularly the creation of the director, because the director is kind of the Wizard of Oz type character for me. He's, the man behind the curtain, who has made these worlds that he loves, but they also became a horrible mess because of choices that he made for his own fun and enjoyment that later ended up making other people suffer. And so these are just different things to think about especially later on in the book, where we see his character again, and he's kind of expressing regret over what a bad creator he was, and the fact that I'm only human though, so what do you expect from me? So it was fun to as a writer, we are sub creators too, and you think about the different things that we make and all of that. But I don't know. Yeah. He had so many intricacies too, in not just in the movie world, but in the way he made for other people to interact with his creation, that he wanted other people to experience it and have an adventure and things like that, but maybe was a bit reckless too. So yeah, I don't know. I find these concepts often come up in things that I write, whether it's with, this director or in my science fiction books. It's been scientists who have unleashed something that they thought would be good. And ended up not being quite what they expected. So kind of that the creator and what these sub creators are doing and things like that. I don't know. So
yeah. You've mentioned it before that the stories you write, one thing that keeps coming up is stewardship.
Yeah.
And I guess that certainly touches on stewardship, this idea of engineers or scientists or whatever making things that then have unintended consequences, let's say. And how about you how does stewardship relate to what you do?
Yeah, I think, these themes come out. Sometimes you'll process what you do too. I don't know that I have necessarily a clear tie between maybe like the evil scientist and what I do or something, but it is hopefully not creating fungus or something. But I guess it's something that just different things that show up in your work, you wonder, it must be on your mind. And I'm not entirely sure all of my thoughts on it, but I know that I think about, what we do with, the time we're given and our talents and how that affects other people. And I think sometimes writing is just a way you process it, even if I don't have necessarily a clear understanding of the connection of the two, but it is something I think about. I mean, I definitely think about what I do and how I want to do good and how I, hope it impacts others in a positive way. And I'm sure I have worries on the, other hand. So I think maybe for people who create things, and maybe all of us, we have some of those thoughts that we kind of wrestle with. Yeah.
I mean, I think unintended consequences is such a rich vein for storytelling. We all think of ourselves as the good guys, that we're trying to do good things in the world. Again, this is us as human beings, not just as people who make stuff. But then there are always unintended consequences that sometimes that's where the real story is, not in what I thought I was doing, but what I ended up doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And then if and in the characters in the books, then somebody else, usually the hero, then has to go and grapple with, okay, well, this has gone this way, these unexpected consequences that you talk about. So, how we grapple with things that aren't always maybe as we would hope them to be. And, what do you do next? What do you do with that? It's interesting things to think about and consider. Yeah.
I guess if it weren't for unintended consequences, there wouldn't really be stories.
No, I suppose not. Whatever the heroes want, isn't generally what they're going to get right off anyways.
Yeah, you've got this main character who's a little bit reckless, who's always, leaping before she looks and all that kind of stuff. And she thinks she knows this is going to be a good experience. And if she were correct, that would be good for her, but it wouldn't be much of a story for us to read, right?
Yeah. Particularly in The Legend of Grey Hollow, the main character is very much, she just wants, a thrill a minute, and is all of life is just this big adventure, and has to then deal with some of the consequences of what happens when you don't consider any type of consequence. And then, she's got to learn to be a more thoughtful person.
Yeah, right. Thankfully, she has a little brother who maybe errs on the other directions.
Yeah, he's a worry wart, I think. A bit of a, doesn't want to get into anything because it might be dangerous. So they both kind of have to come around to maybe a new place by the end.
I can't remember I had an author on early on the podcast, and it's Christy Duncan. Christy Dempsey. Sorry, I knew her before she was married, and she was Christy Duncan when we went to college, but now she's Christy Dempsey. But anyway, she talks about some characters are oh shoot, now I'm going to get it wrong. So Sweethearts and I've just launched into something I'm not ready to talk about, obviously. But the sweethearts have to come around and be a little bit more bumptious, and the overly bumptious characters have to come around and be a little more careful or thoughtful. And I saw that shaping up in The Legend of Grey Hollow. So
yeah.
Sure. Okay, the idea of wonder is important in all of your books. And I love the way that you sort of pay attention to science as a way of getting, not so much in this book so much, but in your mutant mushroom book and in your Killer Komodos books, you're sort of just kind of digging around for interesting creatures in the world to inspire stories. I'd love to hear you tell me a little bit more about that, or tell our listeners a little more about that. Maybe I should say.
Yeah, so I think sometimes it's the unexpected or the strange things that maybe grab my attention. I feel there's so much around us, that's very wondrous and exciting and all of that, but we're immune to it because we've seen it all so many times. So I think that's sometimes where the over the top stuff that's like, whoa, that really can happen, grabs my attention and things, because it's not something we're so familiar with. And I think that's what stories do in general. They're highlighting something that is really there, but we don't notice it or pay attention to it, because it's familiar to us, or, like even if you think about like Jesus's parables or something, just it's highlighting something in a different way so that you can see it in a different way. So I think for my weird science kind of things, I love nature. I'm a big nature dork. If anyone's like sees my Instagram, it's like mostly like my flowers and like trees and things like that, or like weird bugs that come to my yard. So when I found out about like the mutant mushroom book, I watched a fungi documentary with my kids. And just like really excited about nerdy things. It was like, what? Like it seemed almost sinister, some of the things like where they seemed like they could make it's just complicated creation, but like the zombie fungus, which is the mutant mushroom takeover premise of these ants that get infected by this fungus that then makes them grow a big stalk out of their head and go and infect the rest of their colony. And just, it just is fascinating, the complexities in the world, and they're weird and interesting. And I don't know, same thing with the Attack of the Killer Komodos. And I've got extremophiles in there, like tardigrades that can survive being boiled and sent to vacuum of space and, acidic temperatures and things like that. And it's just cool. It's just cool. Yeah, right. Different ways God has made creatures, and he made zombie ant, like he allows that, however it is, but it is a real thing that's there, and wasps that like lay their eggs inside of other creatures, that's just weird, bizarre, but it is. So it's a real thing, and it's fun to explore it, and to think about what it means of these different things that do exist and why they exist, some of the strange things. So
yeah, no, I was a funny thing about your mutant mushrooms and the Killer Komodos is these things that seem like you must have made them up turn out to be not made up at all.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the parables, or for that matter the miracles. When Jesus turns water into wine, the only thing that's miraculous about that is that he does it really quickly. He's doing that all the time. The rain falls and it becomes it gets sucked up into the grapevines, and then it becomes wine, and that's just what it does every day. And the miracle, it just kind of highlights what a wild process that is.
Yeah, I think nature's a great way to see some of those I feel that way about like gardening. When you go out to your garden and everything's dead in the winter, and it just seems like nothing could come back. It's just and then I'm so surprised. It's like, what? There's life here again. And I know I didn't do it. It's like I put something into the ground, but I didn't make the thing grow. And it's just, to me, it's, I don't know, this spring as things were cropping up, I'm like, so many miracles just every day out in the yard as these new things pop up. And it's just a great way to experience these little micro miracles.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know. I was just talking to somebody today about the garden and saying, when you don't have a garden, you think of it as being very slow and not unrewarding, but you think of it, gosh, it takes forever to see anything good happen. But the truth is, once spring comes, there's something interesting to see every day.
Oh yeah, that's true. There is. I love it.
And it's, I love having a garden and just giving yourself reason to wonder, to experience wonder every day,
Yeah. I think that nature's a really rewarding and inspiring place for writers to spend time too. You can get a lot of ideas watching a storm roll in or seeing what bugs are doing. They're very strange. And if you think about them as a villain, they're very good villain characters because a lot of times they're doing something, like, that's really messed up what you're over there doing. A bunch of ants eating another bug or something. I mean, there's ideas everywhere.
Oh, that's funny. Do you find that you have to convince young readers to be interested in natural wonders?
If I just was to talk to maybe my kids or something about like my flower garden, they might be a little more bored. But I think if you spin it in a certain way, which I try to do in my first two books with some of the weirder things of nature, I generally find they're really receptive to that. I've been at book fairs where, I see kids and I ask them, well, do you like, weird nature kind of facts, or what do you, and, that's when you get the kid who said, well, do you know sharks have this many teeth? Did you know? And, a lot of them are really into weird nature, weird kind of wonders out there. So I think that kids are predisposed to like that. Now, I think some of the stuff that they feel like they already know everything about, like if you just try to talk to them about something like the rest of us, if we think we've seen it 100 times, then, we're not interested. I think it's kind of the presentation of it, of letting someone see, there's more to this than maybe you realized.
Yeah. How do you compete with, as a writer of stories for young people, how do you compete with the things that you think about the ways that our attention is monetized, and therefore, there's some people who are very good at capturing our attention through marketing and digital things, and have you given some thought to how you get that attention back from people who are glazed?
Yeah, I think, a lot of the attention span for adults and kids is kind of shortened a little bit now. If you think about like the little short videos everybody watches, like whether that's, they're all like 15-second long. So our attention span is getting compressed a bit. So
when I see a video is, 4.5 minutes, I'm like, 4.5 minutes? I don't have 4.5 minutes.
I have that kind of time, and give it to me in 7 seconds or less. Yeah. So I think there's that element of competition, and also, all the other stuff online that kind of competes for our attentions. But one way I try to get readers into the book, I think if you can get them reading and getting, it's once you're into the story, I think you're more likely to stay in the story, because I know once I'm reading, I've read one chapter, then I was like, you want to read the next, but it's that initial getting into the book. So I do try to start my stories quickly. I'm not trying to start with a bunch of backstory or, today was just a regular day. So I'm trying to understand that there are things that are competing for attention. And so to introduce something that is, hopefully going to, I don't know, either something different or at least in that moment of interest. So I know that's something we all think about with starting our stories is we're not trying to bore our readers.
Yeah.
But with genre fiction, with science fiction or fantasy, you maybe have even more room you can play with that there, because especially if your story is going to have some really kind of out there stuff or something that's pretty intriguing, how quick can you get there? How quick can your opening line maybe reveal a little bit of that so that they're like, whoa, there's going to be this in the book? Okay.
Yeah. I love the opening sentence of Grey Hallow. The streets of downtown Lowry bustled with elves, sorcerers, and even a purple pony was strapped on Pegasus wings.
Yeah. Nice. So she's walking through the movie festival. So trying to reveal that this story does have these fantastical elements and reveal it quickly,
Yeah. Okay. So you are, you're writing for a general market, right? You don't publish in the Christian publishers. That's not where you're publishing your books. But you are interested in conveying the idea, big truths, big transcendent ideas, sometimes in the form of funny science fiction, and sometimes in the form of a portal story going to a movie world. Tell me about that. I mean, you're choosing not to use the language of specifically Christian or theological language, I guess. Although you're interested in some of those big ideas and truths. So talk to me about that. How do you reconcile those?
Yeah. So when I decided I wanted to try to, write a novel or write fiction and thought about who I wanted to write for, I wanted to be able to, I know just, a lot of people just start getting books, at the library, they're going to the bookstore, and I don't know, I guess the idea of being able to communicate to, the 10-year-old who maybe has, I don't know, no truth, or they're not at all exposed to any of Christian thought or things like, I don't know, kind of a gateway to some of these different people. And I know I do like school visits, or I do different things. So there's opportunities also beyond like even the books themselves, of like, think about like agents and editors and just people in the larger publishing world, which is very secular in general. And I don't know, I just felt like I wanted to be kind of more out and about with a wide range of people, and just to kind of see what God would do. And, I have had opportunities to, build relationships, or people who come to me and ask for advice just because of, of these books that are out. Yeah. So, I mean, and I don't know what all may come from different things, but I just want to be open to reach, different people. And as far as things that I put in my book, I think that whether it's, through some, I don't do like the C.S. Lewis direct, allegory kind of things, but sure. I think the idea of, heroes who embody things that are what we know is like good and true, that they're not, the selflessness and sacrifice. And there's lots of ways that we communicate these things that I think now are sometimes heroes are taking on like a lot darker look in a lot of books. And so I think even just by having your like heroes be like truly like heroic is something different. Like a lot of books for younger readers are kind of shifting of what's good and what's evil. Like some of there's even discussion about should there even be like good and evil in these, because they're all kind of this gray, and you know what I mean? So even if you just like your measuring is like, no, like evil is really going to be evil, and like these things are really going to be good, that's can be something that stands out even.
Yeah. And I think also quite apart from what we normally think of as, morality, questions of morality, or good and evil, what we, there's also just the fact that you're attentive to the world God made. Yeah. And I've been talking about this. I don't think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I've been thinking a lot about the idea that thinking God's thoughts after it. Whenever you think about a tree, you're thinking God's thoughts after him, because that tree was an idea before it was a tree. It was God's idea. And in Christianity, accounts for the world in much bigger terms even than morality or good and evil. I mean, it accounts for everything. The universe as God's creation is the fact that you are so attentive and so looking to alert other people to the wonders of a created world. I think that in itself means a lot and is important. So. Well, one thing I wanted to mention that I'm excited about for you is you got a great review in Kirkus Reviews. They said it's packed to the gills with fun. Tell me about that. What was it like to find out that Kirkus Reviews had paid attention to your book?
Oh, well, I was happy because I know that sometimes they're the one who sometimes authors get snarky reviews from Kirkus. So all three of my books have actually been reviewed favorably by Kirkus. That's been a relief and, good news each time my editor will send those to me. And they liked The Legend of Grey Hollow and the other two as well. So that was encouraging. And because you never know how other people will interpret your book. You do what you can on things, and your editor likes it, and the different people like it. And then so it's always great to get good trade reviews from, like Publishers Weekly or School Library Journal or whoever, reviews your book. And if they say good things, you hope that means that other readers will enjoy the book as well.
Yeah. Have you ever got any bad reviews?
I've not gotten any bad trade reviews before. I think I've decided I'm not checking my Goodreads anymore, though, just because when I get good reviews, I don't think, you'll get some random person who doesn't even have a name on their account who doesn't leave a review, but leaves a bad star rating. And then that will make me unhappier than the amount of happiness I get from somebody who's like, this was the best book I ever read. I love it so much. I'm a devoted fan. The happiness I get from that, it doesn't level out with, everyone hates me. They all hate me. No name on Goodreads says it. They didn't say anything. They just left an unfavorable star rating. I don't know why they hate me. So I don't know if I'll stick to it, but I've been not looking at my Goodreads anymore. I'm like, I can look at trade reviews. There's a lot fewer trade reviews. I got a good one from Publishers Weekly for The Legend of Grey Hollow. And so I'm just going to try to be content and disciplined to not torment myself with seeing what every, person who may read my book thinks. So I think that's wise. Good for you.
Okay. I want to know, I want to hear about the writers that make you want to write. Who are the writers that make you want to sit down and do what you do?
That's a good question. Well, always Tolkien for, just I think if you like fantasy, you probably aspire in some way to create this worlds that just live in people's minds. So that would be one as far as just the impact of this secondary world, because all of that just lives in my head all the time. And then as far as writing, I really have enjoyed Catherine Patterson, just the emotional content and the reality of her stories.
Have you read the book of hers that just recently, I don't know if it was re-released or if it was an old book that's re-released or if it's a new book? Now I'm a little vague. You know what I'm talking about? I
think I've heard talk on the Rabbit Room Chinwag about it, but I can't think of what it is, because what I've read of her is her fiction of Bridge to Terabithia and the Great Gilly Hopkins, and so but those are stories I love. So I'm sure I'd probably enjoy her. Story. More recent things too. So, and I also love people who can do humor well. I loved the James Herriot books. I'm eclectic, but as far as what makes me want to write, I think it's the emotional kind of stories where it feels like characters feel really real. And then, I also really like some of the fantasy and sci-fi where that concept is really intriguing, or the world building is
Do you reread Tolkien? Is it when you go back to all over and over again?
I do it on audiobook. I've listened to, I do the audiobook again. So that's what I've done more. I used to never reread books when I was younger because I think my memory was better or something, because I'm like, I remember that book too well and I don't want to go back. But within the last probably, 5 or 10 years, I've started rereading books a lot more. I don't know if it's I can't remember it that well, or if it's just the sense of I want to be back with the people. Like, Pride and Prejudice. It's like, well, it's time for Pride and Prejudice again. Reading it or listening to the audiobook. So I'll do a mixture, just kind of depending. But there's certain books, like the Anne of Green Gables books, the Lord of the Rings, Hobbit.
Yeah.
Silmarillion,
do you read that?
No, I do own it though. But no, I have not read that one. I don't know. It seems like something I have a 15-year-old son, and he really likes world building and creative world building board games. I feel like that's one he would dig maybe more than me, but maybe.
I realized one day I'm never going to read Silmarillion, and then I got it on audiobook and thought, okay, maybe I can do it this way. And then I got halfway through. I said, I just can't do this.
Yeah. So I'm not a fan of Tom Bombadil. So I feel like he's a bit of world building that just exists in the Lord of the Rings. So I feel like if the Silmarillion is a lot of characters who aren't fitting into the bigger. I know a lot of people like Tom Bombadil. My son, Tom Bombadil's awesome.
Yeah.
He just feels tangential to me, like a world building kind of character who doesn't necessarily tie into the bigger story.
Yeah.
Other than, I guess, showing, hey, he's not affected by the ring. He's just transcendent. But I don't know. He always seems boring to me. So I think Silmarillion.
I don't understand that. I love Tom Bombadil.
You do? I don't know. He's always singing, and I'm like, they have a ring that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah, okay. I understand that, but also he's singing and it's great. It's a lovely little song. All right. Well, let's wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Summer. And I'm so excited for this book to be in the world, The Legend of Grey Hollow. And I hope good things happen. I hope a lot of people read it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
This podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. And all our podcasts are made possible by the generous support of our members. To learn more about us, visit rabbitroom.com. And to become a member, rabbitroom.com/donate.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.